The spreadsheet on my desk showed Alexander Pellegrini's schedule for the next 3 weeks in meticulous detail. 8 months as his executive assistant had taught me that precision wasn't just appreciated in this world, it was survival. Every meeting, every phone call, every handshake carried weight that extended far beyond business cards and contracts. I adjusted the collar of my cream blouse and reached for my coffee, now cold after 2 hours of coordinating tomorrow night's annual gathering at the Long Island estate. The Pellegrini family hosted this event every November. A carefully orchestrated display of power, disguised as celebration. My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda, my college roommate who still couldn't understand why I worked for a man whose name appeared in whispered conversations and true crime podcasts. Lunch this week? Feel like I haven't seen you in forever. I typed back a quick promise to check my calendar, knowing I'd probably cancel. Amanda asked too many questions I couldn't answer, noticed too many things I tried to hide. The distance between us had grown naturally over these 8 months, like a plant slowly dying from lack of sunlight. Miss Mitchell. Alexander's voice cut through my thoughts before I saw him. Deep, controlled, with the faint trace of an Italian accent that became more pronounced when he was angry or tired. I looked up to find him standing in the doorway of his office, filling the frame with the kind of presence that made rooms feel smaller. Dark hair, perfectly styled, charcoal suit tailored to emphasize broad shoulders, and those eyes. Brown, so dark they appeared black in certain light, currently fixed on me with the intensity of someone who never asked twice. Yes, Mr. Pellegrini? The guest list for tomorrow. Walk me through it again. I gathered my tablet and followed him into his office, a space of dark wood and leather that smelled faintly of cedar and expensive whiskey. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan, the city sprawling below like a kingdom he'd inherited through blood and strategy. 143 confirmed attendees, I began, pulling up the document. The 5 allied families have all confirmed their heads of household. The Santoro family is bringing their eldest son, first public appearance since the incident in Queens. Alexander nodded, pouring himself 2 fingers of scotch despite it being barely noon. Security? Joseph has assigned 32 men to the perimeter, 8 inside, 6 on rotation. Background checks completed on all catering staff, and the waiters are all from our approved roster. Good. He took a slow sip, his gaze drifting to the windows. I'd learned to read his silences over these months. This one carried tension, the kind that suggested dangers I wasn't privy to. You'll stay close to the main house tomorrow. No wandering to the gardens or terrace alone. It wasn't the first time he'd given me instructions that felt more protective than professional. Is there something I should be concerned about? His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. There's always something to be concerned about in this life, Gabriella. But tomorrow you'll be safe. I'll make certain of it. The way he said my name, with that slight roll of the R, always did something strange to my pulse. I told myself it was nerves, not attraction. You didn't develop feelings for men like Alexander Pellegrini. They were hurricanes in human form, beautiful and devastating in equal measure. What will I wear? I asked, steering the conversation back to safer territory. He set down his glass and finally looked directly at me. Really looked. The kind of assessment that made me hyper-aware of every detail of my appearance. There's a dress in your apartment. It should have been delivered this morning. Wear that. You bought me a dress? I purchased appropriate attire for my assistant to represent me well at an important event, he corrected, but something flickered behind his eyes. If it doesn't fit or you don't like it, there's a number on the card. The boutique will send alternatives. I should have argued about the appropriateness of my boss buying me clothing. Instead, I heard myself say, "Thank you." The next evening, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror examining the dress that had indeed arrived that morning. Burgundy silk that draped elegantly to mid-calf, with a neckline that was sophisticated rather than revealing. It fit perfectly, which shouldn't have surprised me. Alexander noticed everything. The car he'd sent arrived at 7 sharp. Not the usual black sedan, but a sleek Mercedes with a driver I didn't recognize. The 40-minute drive to Long Island passed in silence while I watched the city give way to manicured suburbs, and eventually the gates of the Pellegrini estate. The main house was a study in old-money elegance. Stone facade, sprawling grounds, lights blazing from every window. Valets handled the endless stream of luxury vehicles, while guests in designer clothes climbed the front steps like worshippers approaching a temple. Inside, crystal chandeliers cast golden light over marble floors, and walls hung with artwork that probably belonged in museums. A string quartet played in one corner, while waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres that looked too beautiful to eat. I spotted Alexander immediately. He stood near the grand staircase surrounded by older men in dark suits, his posture relaxed, but his eyes alert. He'd removed his jacket, standing in just vest and white shirt with sleeves rolled to his elbows, somehow making formal wear look dangerous. Our eyes met across the crowded room. He paused mid-sentence, his attention locking onto me with such sudden intensity that the man speaking to him actually turned to see what had captured his focus. I felt heat crawl up my neck as Alexander excused himself and began moving through the crowd in my direction. "Miss Mitchell," he said when he reached me, his voice lower than usual. His gaze traveled over the dress, lingering just long enough to make my breath catch. "It suits you. Thank you for the dress. And for including me tonight. You've earned your place here." He gestured to the room. "You know most of these people from calls and meetings. Consider tonight an opportunity to put faces to names." Before I could respond, a tall man with sandy brown hair and striking blue eyes appeared at Alexander's shoulder. Joseph Ferraro, Alexander's closest friend and most trusted capo. I'd spoken with him dozens of times, coordinating security details and message relays. "Alex, the Santoro kid wants an introduction," Joseph said, then turned to me with an easy smile. "Gabriella, you look beautiful tonight. That color is perfect on you." "Thank you, Joseph." Alexander's hand found the small of my back, the touch burning through the thin silk. "Stay where I can see you," he murmured, low enough that only I could hear. Then he was gone, Joseph at his side as they navigated the crowd with practiced efficiency. I accepted champagne from a passing waiter and tried to look comfortable among people whose combined net worth probably exceeded small countries. The evening passed in a blur of polite conversations and careful observations. I noticed the extra security Joseph had mentioned, men in dark suits positioned strategically throughout the house. I noticed the way certain guests clustered together in tight groups, voices lowered. I noticed the undercurrent of tension beneath the elegant facade. "You're Alexander's new assistant." An older woman with silver hair and emeralds dripping from her neck appeared beside me. "I'm Maria Santoro. You've scheduled several of my calls." "Mrs. Santoro, it's lovely to meet you in person. How long have you worked for him?" 8 months. She studied me with the shrewd assessment of someone who'd spent decades reading people. "You're young to be so trusted. Alexander doesn't grant access to his inner circle easily. You must be very good at your job." "I try to be. Or perhaps you offer something beyond scheduling and phone calls." She smiled, but it held warning. "Be careful, dear. Men like Alexander Pellegrini consume everything in their orbit. They can't help it. It's their nature." She drifted away before I could formulate a response, leaving me unsettled. I set down my half-empty glass and moved toward the terrace doors, suddenly needing air. "Gabriella." Joseph appeared at my elbow, his expression apologetic. "Sorry to interrupt your escape attempt, but I've been ordered to keep you entertained while Alexander plays politician. I'm fine, really. You don't need to babysit me. Trust me. It's more pleasant than listening to old men argue about shipping routes." He gestured toward the center of the room where couples had begun dancing to the quartet's waltz. "Dance with me? It'll give the gossips something to talk about besides territory disputes." I hesitated, but refusing seemed rude. Joseph led me to the dance floor with confident grace, one hand finding my waist while the other clasped mine. He was an excellent dancer, leading with just enough pressure to make following effortless. "You're handling this better than most civilians would," he commented as we turned. "This world can be overwhelming." "I'm still not entirely sure what this world is," I admitted. "Alexander keeps certain details deliberately vague. That's for your protection. The less you know about some things, the safer you are." His expression turned thoughtful, though I'll tell you something he'd never admit. "I've known Alex since we were 10 years old, running around these very grounds causing trouble. I've never seen him as protective of anyone as he is of you. Not even—" He trailed off, but I understood. Not even his late wife. The woman whose photograph still sat on his desk in a simple silver frame. He's my boss. It's probably just professional concern. Joseph laughed, the sound drawing curious glances from nearby dancers. Gabriella, I've worked with Alex for 15 years. I know the difference between professional concern and something else entirely. The man watches you like whatever comparison Joseph was about to make died unspoken. His eyes widened slightly, focused on something over my shoulder. Oh, this should be interesting. I felt Alexander's presence before I heard him. The air itself seemed to shift, temperature dropping as he appeared beside us with controlled fury radiating from every line of his body. Joseph. My name wasn't a question. It was a command wrapped in silk. Joseph's hands dropped from my waist immediately. Boss, we were just... I can see what you were doing. Alexander's voice remained perfectly level, which somehow made it more threatening. His dark eyes fixed on me with an intensity that stole my breath. Miss Mitchell, walk with me, now. He didn't wait for agreement, simply turned and headed toward the terrace doors. Joseph gave me an apologetic shrug as I hurried to follow, hyper-aware of the curious stares tracking our progress through the crowd. The terrace was empty, illuminated by strings of lights overhead, and the glow from the house behind us. Alexander strode to the stone balustrade overlooking the grounds, his hands gripping the edge hard enough that his knuckles whitened. Mr. Pellegrini, if I did something wrong, did you enjoy dancing with Joseph? He turned to face me, and the raw emotion in his expression made me take an involuntary step back. This wasn't the controlled businessman I knew. This was something far more dangerous. It was just a dance. He was being polite. Polite. He advanced slowly, each step measured. Joseph was being polite. And you were what? Grateful for the attention? I don't understand why you're angry. Don't you? He stopped inches away, close enough that I could smell his cologne and see the muscle ticking in his jaw. 8 months, Gabriella. 8 months of you in my office, in my space, in my thoughts. 8 months of maintaining appropriate distance while wanting nothing more than to... He cut himself off, jaw clenching. My heart hammered against my ribs. Alexander, do you know how many men in that room watched you tonight? How many looked at you the way they have no right to look at what's mine? The possessiveness in his tone should have alarmed me. Instead, it sent heat coursing through my veins. I'm not yours, I whispered. But the words lacked conviction. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my temple. Aren't you? Then why do you tremble when I'm near? Why does your pulse race when I say your name? His finger traced along my jaw, feather light. Why did you look at me like I was the only person in that room the moment you arrived? I couldn't answer. Couldn't think past the electricity sparking between us. I can't watch you in another man's arms, he said quietly, the confession seeming to cost him something. Not Joseph's, not anyone's. It takes everything in me not to make certain everyone in that house understands that you belong to me. This isn't appropriate, I managed, though my body betrayed me by swaying toward him. You're my employer. There are boundaries. Boundaries. He laughed, the sound bitter. I've been clinging to those boundaries like they could save me. But seeing you tonight, in that dress I chose because I wanted to see you in something beautiful, watching another man hold you. His hand slid to my waist, pulling me flush against him. I'm done pretending those boundaries mean anything. The rational part of my brain screamed warnings about power dynamics and professional suicide. But standing there with his arms around me, his dark eyes burning with barely restrained desire, I couldn't remember why those warnings mattered. What are you saying? My voice came out breathless. I'm saying that you're the first thing I think about when I wake and the last thought before sleep. I'm saying that I've been trying to convince myself this is just proximity, just attraction. But it's more than that. You've become necessary to me in ways that have nothing to do with scheduling meetings. His thumb traced circles on my hip. Tell me you don't feel this too, and I'll walk away. I'll maintain every professional boundary. But tell me the truth, Gabriella. I stared up at him. This powerful, dangerous man who'd somehow become the center of my world, without me realizing when it happened. The smart choice was clear. The safe choice was obvious. I feel it, I whispered. God help me. I feel it too. Something fierce and triumphant flashed across his face. Then his mouth was on mine, claiming rather than asking, one hand fisting in my hair while the other held me tight against him. I melted into the kiss, 8 months of tension and denial combusting into desperate need. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alexander rested his forehead against mine. "This changes everything," he murmured. "I know. There are things about my life, my world, that you don't fully understand yet. Things that could put you at risk just by association." I pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "Then help me understand. No more vagueness and half-truths. If we're doing this, I need honesty." He studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Tomorrow. Come to my office tomorrow, and I'll tell you everything you need to know. But tonight," he traced my swollen lower lip with his thumb. "Tonight, let me have this moment before reality intrudes." He kissed me again, slower this time, thorough and possessive. When we finally returned to the party, I knew nothing would ever be the same between us. I'd crossed a line with my dangerous boss, and some part of me recognized there would be no going back to professional distance and carefully maintained boundaries. I just didn't know yet how much that single kiss on a terrace would cost me. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt Alexander's hands on my waist, tasted his kiss, heard the raw hunger in his voice when he'd called me his. By the time dawn broke over my apartment, I'd convinced myself a dozen times that last night had been a mistake, then talked myself back into wanting it anyway. Monday morning arrived with cruel inevitability. I dressed in my usual work uniform of tailored pants and a silk blouse, this one pale gray, and tried to prepare myself for whatever version of Alexander I'd encounter. The man who'd kissed me breathless on the terrace, or the controlled businessman who kept the world at arm's length. The office felt different when I arrived at 8 sharp. Same sleek reception area, same view of Manhattan spreading below, but the air itself seemed charged with possibility and danger. I set my bag down at my desk and booted up my computer, forcing myself into the familiar routine of checking emails and confirming appointments. Alexander's office door remained closed. His calendar showed he'd arrived an hour earlier than usual, which meant he was either avoiding me or dealing with something that required privacy. I suspected both. At 9:15, the door opened. He emerged wearing a navy suit that fit him like armor, his expression carefully neutral. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second before he looked away, jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "Miss Mitchell, good morning. The conference room should be set up for the 10 o'clock with the investors from Tokyo. Please confirm catering has arrived." Miss Mitchell, not Gabriella. The formality stung more than it should have. "Of course, Mr. Pellegrini. Everything's been arranged." He nodded once and retreated back into his office, the door closing with a soft click that felt remarkably like a barrier being erected. I stared at the dark wood, emotions warring between hurt and understanding. He'd promised me honesty today, explanations about his world and the dangers I didn't fully comprehend. Perhaps this distance was his way of maintaining control until we could have that conversation. The morning crawled past with agonizing slowness. The meeting with the Japanese investors went smoothly, a discussion about expanding wine imports that required my skills as a translator more than my presence. I sat in the corner taking notes, hyper-aware of Alexander at the head of the table. He commanded the room effortlessly, switching between English and passable Japanese, negotiating terms with the kind of intelligence that had nothing to do with formal education. But I noticed the small tells, how he shifted slightly whenever I spoke, how his fingers drummed once against the table when one of the investors complimented my translation skills, how his gaze would start to drift toward me before he forcibly redirected it to the spreadsheets and projections. When the investors finally left, pleased with the preliminary agreements, Alexander gathered his materials without looking at me. "Thank you for your assistance, Miss Mitchell. That will be all for now." The dismissal was clear. I returned to my desk feeling unmoored, uncertain whether I should push for the conversation he'd promised or give him space to work through whatever internal battle he was clearly fighting. At 2:30, Joseph appeared in the reception area carrying coffee from the Italian place 3 blocks away that Alexander preferred. He set one cup on my desk with an apologetic smile. "Peace offering for getting you in trouble last night." "You didn't get me in trouble. I'm a grown woman who chose to dance with you. Yeah, but I knew what I was doing. He settled into one of the leather chairs across from my desk, long legs stretched out. Alex doesn't lose his composure often. Seeing him that jealous was educational. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup. He's barely looked at me all day. I think he's regretting whatever happened last night. He's not regretting it. He's terrified of it. Joseph glanced toward Alexander's closed door, then lowered his voice. Look, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but you deserve context. 6 months ago, things got complicated. There's a group, Albanians led by a guy named Viktor Krasniki, who've been pushing hard for control of the port operations. 3 people are dead already from the fallout. My stomach clenched. What kind of people? Associates of allied families. One was a cousin of the Santoro kid you met last night. These Albanians, they don't follow the old rules. They're brutal and unpredictable. He took a sip of his coffee. About 2 months ago, they started getting more personal, taking photographs of people close to the leadership. Family members, significant others, anyone who could be leverage. Understanding crashed over me like cold water. That's why Alexander mentioned security at the party. That's why he's had men watching you since September, even though you didn't know it. Discreet surveillance to make sure no one from Victor's crew got too interested. Joseph's blue eyes held sympathy. Alex has been trying to keep distance between you for your own protection. Last night when he saw you in that dress, saw me dancing with you, every defense he'd built just crumbled. Why didn't anyone tell me I was being watched? Because you'd have reacted exactly like you are now. Scared, probably angry, definitely questioning whether this job is worth it. He leaned forward. But here's what you need to understand about Alexander Pellegrini. His wife, Sophia, died 4 years ago in what was ruled an accident. Car went off a bridge upstate on a rainy night. But Alex has never believed it was random. He thinks it was retaliation for a deal gone wrong, and he's carried that guilt every day since. My throat tightened. He loved her. He did. And when she died, part of him shut down completely. I've watched him go through the motions of living without actually being alive. Until you showed up 8 months ago with your organizational skills and your stubborn insistence on doing things properly. Joseph smiled slightly. He started coming back to himself. Started caring about something beyond business and revenge. That terrifies him because caring about you makes you vulnerable, and making you vulnerable puts you at risk. I processed this information. Puzzle pieces clicking into place. The overprotectiveness that seemed excessive for an assistant. The way he'd reacted to seeing me with Joseph. The conflict I'd heard in his voice when he'd admitted wanting me. So, what am I supposed to do with this information? That's up to you. But if you're going to be part of his life, you need to understand what that means. This world isn't safe, Gabriella. It's not corporate politics and negotiation tactics. People die when they get too close to power, when they become weaknesses that can be exploited. He stood, straightening his jacket. Alex promised you honesty. When he finally gives it to you, really listen. Then decide if you can handle what comes with loving a man like him. Joseph left before I could formulate a response. I sat at my desk, staring at my computer screen without seeing it. Mind racing with implications. The security I hadn't noticed. The threats I hadn't known existed. The weight of Alexander's past grief and present fear. The afternoon passed in a haze of routine tasks that required no thought. At 5:30, most of the office staff filtered out, heading home to normal lives that didn't include surveillance and territorial wars. I remained at my desk, unwilling to leave without the conversation Alexander had promised. At 6:15, his door finally opened. He stood in the doorway, tie loosened and sleeves rolled up, exhaustion evident in the lines around his eyes. You're still here. You promised me honesty. I'm waiting for you to deliver. Something that might have been respect flickered across his face. Come in. His office had darkened with the setting sun, only his desk lamp providing illumination. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey without asking if I wanted one, then gestured to the sofa in the corner rather than the formal chairs across from his desk. Joseph talked to you, he said, once we were seated. Not a question. He gave me context, background about threats I didn't know existed, and protection I didn't know I had. I took a sip of the whiskey, letting it burn down my throat. Why didn't you tell me? Because knowing makes you a target in ways ignorance doesn't. If Victor's people thought you were just my assistant, uninvolved in anything significant, you'd be safer than if they knew." He trailed off, fingers tightening around his glass. Knew what? His dark eyes met mine with devastating honesty. Knew that you've become the most important person in my life. That I'd burn down half the city before I let anyone hurt you. That losing you would destroy me in ways losing Sophia never did. Because with her, I loved who I was supposed to love. With you, I love who I chose. Despite every reason not to, the confession stole my breath. "Alexander, you need to understand what being close to me means, Gabriella. It means security following you places. It means vetting everyone you interact with. It means looking over your shoulder and questioning motives and living with the knowledge that my enemies will see you as my greatest weakness." He set down his glass and took my hand, his thumb tracing patterns on my palm. "It means danger that you didn't ask for and don't deserve. And if I said that doesn't scare me, then I'd say you don't fully understand what you're agreeing to." His voice dropped lower. "But I'm selfish enough to hope you'll stay anyway." I thought about walking away, about returning to a normal life where the most dangerous thing in my day was rush hour traffic, about finding a job that didn't come with armed security and territorial disputes that left bodies in their wake. Then I looked at Alexander, really looked at him, saw the vulnerability beneath the controlled exterior, the loneliness he'd been carrying for 4 years, the desperate hope that maybe he could have something good despite the darkness he lived in. "I'm not going anywhere," I said quietly, "but I need you to stop trying to protect me by pushing me away. If we're doing this, we do it together. No more keeping me in the dark about threats. No more avoiding me because you're afraid of what you feel." Relief washed over his features. "That goes against every instinct I have. Then you'll have to learn new instincts." He pulled me closer, until I was tucked against his side, his arm around my shoulders. We sat in comfortable silence while night fell completely outside the windows, the city lights spreading below like fallen stars. "I need to take you somewhere," he said eventually. "Somewhere we can talk without interruption. Will you have dinner with me?" "Is this a date or a business meeting?" The corner of his mouth lifted in something approaching a smile. "Does it matter?" "I suppose not." The restaurant he chose was tucked away in Little Italy, the kind of place without a sign where the host greeted Alexander by name and led us to a private room in the back. Red wine appeared without being ordered, along with bread still warm from the oven and olive oil that probably cost more per bottle than my monthly grocery budget. We talked about everything and nothing. He told me about growing up in this world, how his father had groomed him from childhood to take over the family operations, how he'd tried to go legitimate for a while after marrying Sophia, investing in legal businesses, and distancing himself from the more questionable enterprises. How her death had pulled him back into the darkness because at least there, grief made sense. I told him about my parents who died in a small plane crash 3 years ago, leaving me untethered and searching for purpose. About how I'd fallen into this job by accident, answering an ad that seemed too good to be true, never imagining where it would lead. By the time our car pulled up outside my apartment building in Queens, it was nearly midnight. The driver, Marco, got out to open my door, but Alexander waved him off. "Wait here. I'll be 5 minutes." He walked me to the entrance, his hand warm on the small of my back. At the door, I turned to face him, suddenly uncertain about protocol. "How did you say goodnight to your boss who'd become something more?" "Thank you for dinner. And for the honesty. Thank you for staying despite knowing better." He cupped my face in his hands, thumbs brushing my cheekbones. "I'll see you tomorrow?" "Every day," I promised. He kissed me then. Softer than the desperate claiming on the terrace, but no less intense. When he finally pulled away, his forehead rested against mine. "This is dangerous for both of us," he murmured. "But I can't seem to care anymore." "Good. Because I stopped caring about the danger the moment you admitted you felt the same way I did." I watched his car disappear into traffic before heading upstairs, my lips still tingling, and my heart full of something that felt remarkably like hope, despite all the warnings about his world and its violence. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, I'd chosen Alexander Pellegrini with my eyes open, and somehow that made all the difference. 2 weeks passed in a strange new rhythm. Outwardly, nothing changed. I still arrived at the office at 8, still managed Alexander's impossibly complex schedule, still coordinated meetings and fielded calls from people whose names carried weight in circles I was only beginning to understand. But beneath the professional surface, everything had transformed. Alexander no longer treated me as simply his assistant. During strategy sessions about shipping route negotiations, he'd pause and ask my opinion, actually listening when I pointed out potential complications or alternative approaches. When the Santoro family wanted to adjust payment terms on a shared venture, he had me sit in on the call, afterward asking what I'd noticed about their negotiation tactics. "You have good instincts," he said one afternoon, standing behind my chair as we reviewed quarterly projections on my computer screen. His hand rested on my shoulder, thumb absently stroking the curve of my neck. "You read people well. That's a valuable skill in this world." "I just pay attention," I replied, hyper-aware of his touch and the warmth radiating from his body. "Most people don't. They hear what they want to hear, see what confirms their existing beliefs. You actually observe." He leaned down, his breath warm against my ear. "It's one of the many things I find fascinating about you." These moments happened constantly now. Stolen touches in his office when no one else was around. Long dinners at restaurants where he was greeted like royalty. Conversations flowing from business to philosophy to the small details of our lives. He told me about his mother who'd died when he was 16. How she'd been the moral compass his father lacked. I told him about the last conversation I'd had with my mom before the plane crash. How I'd been annoyed about something trivial, and now couldn't remember what. Only that my last words to her had been impatient. "Guilt is a useless emotion," Alexander said, his fingers laced with mine across the white tablecloth. "It changes nothing and destroys everything if you let it," says the man who blames himself for his wife's death. His jaw tightened. That's different. I had actual responsibility there. Choices I made led directly to consequences that killed her. You don't know that for certain. I know enough. He signaled for the check, effectively ending that particular discussion. Some wounds were still too fresh to examine, even after 4 years. On a Wednesday morning, I received an email confirmation that made my stomach drop. A charitable donation of $50,000 to Mercy Hospital in my mother's name, funding research for the rare cancer that had eventually taken her. The donor was listed as anonymous, but there was only one person who could have known the specific department, the specific doctors she'd been treated by. I walked into Alexander's office without knocking, the printed email clutched in my hand. He looked up from his laptop, reading glasses perched on his nose in a way that made him look almost scholarly. "You donated to my mother's hospital." My voice came out thick with emotion. $50,000 for cancer research. He removed the glasses slowly, setting them aside. "Your mother deserved better care than she received. This ensures other families might have better options." "Alexander, that's an incredible amount of money." "It's nothing." He stood, moving around the desk toward me. "Money means nothing to me, Gabriella. It's a tool, a means to an end. If I can use it to honor someone important to you, that's not generosity. That's basic human decency." I didn't realize I was crying until he wiped tears from my cheeks with his thumbs. "No one has ever done anything like this for me. Then people have consistently failed you." He pulled me against his chest, one hand stroking my hair. "Get used to it." I have no intention of stopping. Thursday afternoon, he appeared at my desk with plane tickets. "We're going to Boston tomorrow. Meetings with potential investors for the legitimate shipping expansion. We'll return Sunday evening." "Separate hotel rooms?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Something dark and heated flashed in his eyes. "Separate floors, actually. I don't trust myself with you down the hall. And you deserve better than me showing up at your door at 2 a.m. because I can't sleep knowing you're so close." The confession sent heat pooling low in my stomach. We'd kissed several times since that first night on the terrace. Stolen moments of passion that left us both breathless and wanting more. But Alexander maintained firm boundaries about physical intimacy, insisting I needed time to fully understand what choosing him meant before we crossed that particular line. Boston greeted us with cold November rain and winds that cut through my coat. The hotel was boutique luxury in the heart of the financial district, all modern lines and expensive minimalism. True to his word, Alexander booked himself on the 20th floor, while I occupied a room on the 15th. Friday's meetings were productive but exhausting. Venture capitalists who wanted detailed projections and risk assessments, lawyers who nitpicked every clause in preliminary agreements. By the time we finished dinner with the last group at 9, I was ready to collapse. "Get some sleep," Alexander said as the elevator doors closed, leaving us alone. "Tomorrow's schedule is lighter. Just one breakfast meeting, then the afternoon is yours. What will you do with your afternoon?" "Work. Always work." But he smiled slightly. "Though perhaps I could be convinced to play tourist if you wanted company exploring the city. I'd like that." The elevator stopped at my floor. He followed me out, walking me to my room despite there being no rational need for an escort in a luxury hotel. At my door, he caged me against the frame with his arms, not quite touching but close enough that I could feel his body heat. "I want to come inside," he said quietly, his voice rough with desire. "I want to forget about appropriate timing and rational decisions. I want you in ways that have nothing to do with patience or respect." My breath caught. "What's stopping you?" "The knowledge that you deserve better than a hotel room in a city that isn't home. The certainty that once I have you that way, I'll never let you go." His forehead touched mine. "And the awareness that my world is about to get significantly more dangerous. And I need you to see that reality before we complicate things further." "More dangerous how?" "Get some sleep, Gabriella. I'll explain soon." He kissed me once, thorough and claiming, then stepped back. 6 a.m, rooftop. "Bring a jacket." He was gone before I could question the cryptic instruction. I barely slept, anticipation and confusion warring in my mind. At 5:45, I dressed in jeans and a sweater, grabbed my warmest jacket, and took the elevator to the rooftop access. Alexander was already there, leaning against the railing with coffee in hand. The sky was just beginning to lighten, stars fading as dawn approached. He looked different in casual clothes, jeans and a black sweater that emphasized his broad shoulders, hair slightly disheveled from the wind. "Couldn't sleep either?" I asked, accepting the second coffee cup he handed me. "I rarely sleep well. Too many ghosts and hypothetical disasters running through my head." He gestured to the horizon where the sun was just beginning to paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. "But sunrise always feels like proof that the world keeps turning despite everything." We stood in comfortable silence, watching dawn break over Boston. Eventually, he began talking, his voice quiet, but steady. "Sophia died on a night like this. Cold, rainy, terrible visibility. She was driving home from a charity event I'd skipped because of business. Her car went off a bridge into the river. They said she drowned before anyone could reach her." His fingers tightened around his coffee cup. "The official investigation ruled it an accident. Wet roads, difficult conditions. But there were details that never added up. Her brake lines showed signs of tampering that the police dismissed as damage from the impact. A witness reported seeing another vehicle following her that disappeared after the crash. You think someone killed her. I know someone killed her. I just could never prove who gave the order or why." He turned to face me fully. "That's the reality of my world, Gabriella. People die for reasons as simple as sending messages or as complicated as decade-old grudges. And the people closest to power are always the most vulnerable targets." I set down my coffee and took his hand. "Tell me about her. Not how she died, but who she was." Surprise flickered across his face, followed by something that might have been gratitude. "She was kind, not in a superficial way, but genuinely good. She saw the best in people even when they didn't deserve it. She believed I could be better than what I was raised to be. Believed I could build something legitimate that didn't rely on fear and violence." "Did you love her?" "Yes. Not with the consuming intensity that poets write about, but with respect and genuine affection. We built a good life together. And when she died, the guilt nearly destroyed me. Not just because she was gone, but because I'd brought her into this world and couldn't protect her from it." The sun had fully risen now, bathing the rooftop in golden light. "Is that why you've been trying to keep distance from me? Because you're afraid history will repeat itself?" I was trying, but I failed spectacularly. He cupped my face in his hands. "You're not Sophia. You don't see me through rose-colored glasses or believe I can be redeemed through love. You see exactly who I am, all the darkness and violence and moral compromise. And you're still standing here. That terrifies me and amazes me in equal measure. I'm not going anywhere, Alexander. Whatever's coming, we'll face it together. He kissed me then, soft and almost reverent, like I was something precious he was afraid of breaking. When we finally broke apart, the city below had come fully awake, traffic flowing like blood through concrete arteries. The return flight Sunday evening was quiet, both of us absorbed in our own thoughts. I'd tried calling Amanda twice over the weekend, an old habit of checking in with my best friend, but both times I'd hung up before she answered, suddenly aware of how much danger simply knowing me might put her in. The realization sat heavy in my chest. Choosing Alexander meant choosing isolation in ways I hadn't fully considered. Monday morning brought the consequences of that choice into sharp focus. I arrived at my desk to find a cream-colored envelope with no return address sitting in the center of my workspace. My name was written across the front in elegant script that somehow managed to look threatening. I picked it up slowly, instinct screaming that whatever was inside would change everything. Inside were photographs. Me leaving my apartment building. Me entering Alexander's office tower. Me at the restaurant in Boston, visible through the window. And most damning, me and Alexander on the hotel rooftop, his hands cradling my face, the kiss captured in perfect clarity. Beneath the photos was a note in a language I didn't recognize, all harsh consonants and unfamiliar letters. But the message was clear, even without translation. We're watching. We know what you mean to him. My hands shook as I carried the envelope into Alexander's office. He was on a call, but took one look at my face and immediately ended the conversation. What happened? I set the envelope on his desk without speaking. He opened it, his expression going completely cold as he examined each photograph. When he reached the note, his jaw clenched hard enough that I could see the muscle ticking beneath his skin. Albanian, he said flatly. From Victor's crew. The message says they'll be in touch soon with instructions. Instructions for what? His dark eyes met mine, and I saw genuine fear there for the first time since I'd known him. For whatever they think will hurt me most. Kidnapping, extortion, or worse. The reality of the situation crashed over me like ice water. This wasn't abstract danger or hypothetical threats. These people had been following me, photographing me, planning whatever came next. The security Joseph mentioned, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. How long have they actually been watching me? Since early September. We noticed Albanian surveillance of key associates and family members. I had Joseph assign protection to you immediately, without telling me, to keep you safe and unaware. If you'd known, you would have reacted differently, been more cautious. They would have noticed and realized you were important. He came around the desk, pulling me against him. This is my fault. I should have maintained distance. I should have kept you out of this. I pulled back enough to look at him. Don't make this about regret or guilt. I need you to tell me everything right now. No more protecting me through ignorance. Who is Victor Krasniki and what does he want? Alexander studied my face, clearly weighing how much truth I could handle. Whatever he saw there must have convinced him because he nodded slowly. Sit down. This is going to take a while. For the next hour, he explained the situation in brutal detail. Victor Krasniki led a faction of the Albanian Mafia that had been trying to muscle into New York territory for the past 2 years. They wanted control of the port operations that 5 Italian families, including the Pellegrinis, had controlled for 3 generations. 3 people had died already in escalating conflicts, including a cousin of the Santoro family who'd been found with his throat cut as a message about respecting boundaries. The Albanians didn't follow the old codes of conduct. They targeted civilians, used excessive violence, and had no respect for the traditions that kept organized crime from becoming complete chaos. Victor himself was known for brutality, even among his own people, taking sadistic pleasure in making examples of those who crossed him. Why haven't the families united against him? I asked. They're trying. But Victor has connections to Eastern European networks that give him resources we can't easily match. Plus, there's disagreement about how to respond. Some families want negotiation. Others want all-out war. The uncertainty is exactly what Victor wants. It keeps us reactive instead of strategic. I processed this, my mind racing through implications. So, by making me a target, He's trying to destabilize your decision-making. Exactly. If I'm worried about protecting you, I'm not focused on the larger conflict. And if he can take you, he has leverage to force concessions that would ultimately weaken the entire alliance. The casual discussion of my kidnapping should have sent me running. Instead, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Fear would come later. Right now, I needed information. What are my options? Alexander looked surprised by the question. I can arrange for you to leave New York entirely. New identity, financial support, complete separation from this world. You'd be safe, but you'd have to disappear completely. And the other option? You accept my protection. Real protection, not the discreet surveillance you didn't know about. That means moving to a secure location, armed security at all times, and restrictions on your movements until we neutralize the threat. I thought about running, about taking his offer of a new life far from danger and impossible choices. But I'd already fallen too deep into this world, too deep into loving Alexander despite every reason not to. Walking away now would be saving myself while leaving him to face threats I'd become part of. I want the protection, I said firmly. But I have conditions. His eyebrows rose slightly. You're negotiating with me right now? You said I read people well, that I have good instincts. Trust those instincts enough to let me be part of decisions that affect my life. I won't be locked away like some fragile thing that might break. If I'm accepting this world, I'm doing it with my eyes open and my voice heard. For a long moment, he just stared at me. Then something that looked remarkably like pride crossed his face. Agreed. But the security is non-negotiable. Where I tell you to go, you go. If my men say something isn't safe, you listen. I need to know you're protected even when I can't be there personally. I can accept that. He pulled me into his arms, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. I'm going to end this, he murmured against my hair. Victor and his entire operation. Whatever it takes. Standing there in his office with photographic evidence of surveillance scattered across his desk, I understood I'd just committed myself fully to Alexander's world. The danger was real and immediate. There would be no going back to my ordinary life. No pretending this was just an unconventional relationship with a powerful man. I'd chosen him, and that choice came with consequences I was only beginning to comprehend. The penthouse in Tribeca occupied the entire top floor of a converted warehouse, all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson River. Alexander's men had swept it twice before allowing me inside, checking for surveillance devices and security vulnerabilities with efficiency that suggested they'd done this many times before. The bedroom is through there, Alexander said, gesturing to a hallway. Ensuite bathroom, walk-in closet. Your clothes from the apartment have already been transferred. I turned to face him. Where will you sleep? The study converts. There's a pull-out couch. Alexander, this is your space. I'm not kicking you out of your own bedroom. His jaw tightened. We're not sharing a bed, Gabriella. Not while you're here because of threats rather than genuine choice. I won't blur those lines. The frustration in his voice suggested this was an argument he was having more with himself than with me. I decided not to push. At least not yet. The first few days were awkward. We circled each other like fighters looking for openings, hyper-aware of the forced intimacy. Alexander left early for the office and returned late, bringing work with him that kept him occupied until I went to bed. I spent my days working remotely, coordinating his schedule, and handling correspondence from the safety of the penthouse, while two guards I'd been introduced to as Carlo and Vincent maintained watch in the hallway. But gradually, the strangeness faded into routine. Alexander started coming home earlier, no longer using work as an excuse to avoid proximity. We'd have dinner together at the massive dining table, conversations flowing from business strategies to books we'd read to childhood memories that shaped who we'd become. My father wanted me to be a lawyer, he said one evening over pasta I'd insisted on cooking myself. Thought having someone in the family with a legitimate law degree would be useful. I lasted one semester before he pulled me out to handle a situation that required less legal expertise and more direct persuasion. Do you regret not finishing? He considered the question seriously. I regret not having the choice. Everything in my life was decided before I was old enough to understand what those decisions meant. The business, the responsibilities, the violence. It was my inheritance whether I wanted it or not. But you're good at it. Leading, making hard decisions, commanding loyalty. Being good at something doesn't mean it's what you were meant to do. He reached across the table, his fingers finding mine. Sometimes I wonder who I might have been in a different life. Someone normal who worried about mortgage payments and traffic jams instead of territorial disputes and body counts. You'd be bored within a week. He laughed, the sound surprising us both. Probably true. But maybe I'd have met you in that normal life too. Maybe we'd have had something simpler, without all this danger and complication. Maybe. But I don't think I'd want simple if it meant not knowing you like this. All of you. Including the parts that came from violence and difficult choices. The intimacy between us deepened with each passing day. I discovered he read philosophy before bed, favoring Marcus Aurelius and Seneca. He learned I painted as a hobby, something I hadn't done in years, but found myself returning to with supplies he'd somehow acquired. The third bedroom became my makeshift studio. Afternoon light perfect for capturing the city views in acrylics. But beneath the domestic tranquility, tension simmered. Alexander was conducting an investigation, I realized, watching him during phone calls and video conferences. He'd ask seemingly casual questions about financial details or operational logistics, his eyes sharp as he evaluated responses, testing people, searching for inconsistencies that might reveal disloyalty. 3 weeks into our arrangement, I attended a virtual budget review meeting from the penthouse. Paolo Ricci, the chief accountant who'd been with the family for 12 years, presented quarterly projections with his usual attention to detail. But something felt wrong. His hands trembled slightly as he navigated spreadsheets. His eyes darted away from the camera whenever Alexander asked direct questions. He stumbled over explanations that should have been routine for someone of his experience. After the call ended, I found Alexander in his study, reviewing notes from the meeting. "Paolo seemed nervous today," I commented, keeping my tone casual. Alexander's eyes sharpened. "You noticed that too." He avoided looking directly at the camera during the discussion about port operations revenue, and he fumbled the comparison between third and fourth quarter projections, which isn't like him. Paolo usually has those numbers memorized. What else? I thought back through the meeting. He mentioned a payment to a shipping contractor I don't remember approving, and I approve all his payment authorizations. It wasn't much, maybe $15,000, but it wasn't in the documentation he sent beforehand. Alexander leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "I've been watching Paolo for 10 days now. Small inconsistencies in reports, unexplained meetings with people outside our usual network. I wanted confirmation I wasn't seeing patterns where none existed. You think he's the leak. I think he's being pressured. Paolo has a daughter, mid-20s, who's developed some expensive habits. Gambling debts that keep growing. That kind of vulnerability is exactly what Victor's people exploit. The casual discussion of surveillance and exploitation should have disturbed me more than it did. Instead, I found myself analyzing the situation strategically. If he's being blackmailed rather than acting from genuine disloyalty, he might be convinced to work with you instead of against you. My thoughts exactly, but I need to be certain before I make that approach. If I'm wrong, and he's genuinely turned, confronting him prematurely tips our hand. I moved behind his chair, my hands settling on his shoulders. The muscles there were tight with stress, carrying weight that never fully released. "You'll figure it out. You always do." He reached up, covering one of my hands with his. "Having you here helps. Knowing you're safe while I deal with this. I can focus without constantly worrying about where you are and who might be watching." That evening, I decided to make dinner myself, rather than ordering from the restaurant downstairs. The penthouse kitchen was absurdly well equipped, all professional-grade appliances and more cookware than 2 people could ever need. I found pasta and ingredients for a simple sauce, something my mother had taught me years ago. I was humming while the sauce simmered, barefoot on the cool tile floor with my hair pulled into a messy knot, when I felt Alexander's presence. I turned to find him frozen in the doorway, his expression unreadable but intense. "I didn't hear you come in. You were singing." His voice sounded strained. An old Italian folk song. My mother used to sing it while cooking. I realized with sudden clarity what this moment meant to him. "I'm sorry. I didn't know." "Don't apologize." He moved into the kitchen slowly, like approaching something that might disappear if he moved too fast. Sophia sang it too. She learned it trying to connect with my family's heritage. You sing it like you grew up with it. My grandmother taught me. She was from Naples originally. He stopped mere inches away, close enough that I could see the conflict in his dark eyes. Desire warred with something else. Fear or restraint or both. His hand rose to cup my cheek, thumb tracing my lower lip with devastating gentleness. I want to kiss you right now more than I want my next breath. Then kiss me. I can't. Not here. Not like this. His forehead dropped to rest against mine. You're here because of threats and danger I brought into your life. Because my world made you a target. Anything physical between us right now would be tainted by circumstance, by proximity and adrenaline, and the intensity of forced closeness. That's not true. I chose to stay with you before any of this happened. But did you choose freely, or did you choose because you'd already fallen too deep to see another option? He pulled back slightly, his hands framing my face. I need you to have clear choice, Gabriella. Not choice influenced by fear or gratitude or Stockholm Syndrome disguised as love. When we cross that line, I need to know it's because you want me, not because circumstances pushed you into my arms. The nobility of his restraint frustrated and moved me simultaneously. You're overthinking this. Maybe. But I've taken so much from you already. Your safety, your normal life, your ability to exist without armed guards and constant vigilance. I won't take your agency too. He kissed my forehead, chaste and gentle. When this is over, when Victor is no longer a threat, and you can leave if you want to, ask me again. If you still want me then, nothing will stop me from making you mine in every way possible. He stepped back, the distance between us feeling like miles rather than feet. Dinner smells incredible. I'll set the table. I watched him move through the kitchen with practiced efficiency, gathering plates and silverware, and understood something fundamental about Alexander Pellegrini. For all his power and control, for all the violence and moral compromise that defined his world, he possessed a core of honor that refused to bend, even when it cost him something he desperately wanted. That night, lying alone in his bedroom while he slept in the study, I made a decision. When this was over, when the threats had been neutralized and life returned to whatever passed for normal, I would choose him again. Deliberately, clearly, without any shadow of circumstance to cloud the decision. And then nothing would keep us apart. The next morning, Joseph arrived for a breakfast meeting that Alexander had been deliberately vague about. I joined them at the dining table, no longer content to be excluded from discussions about my own safety. The situation escalated last night, Joseph said without preamble. The Albanians grabbed Tommy Benedetti, 16 years old, nephew of Carlo Benedetti from the smaller Brooklyn family. They're demanding territorial concessions for his return. My stomach clenched. Will they actually release him if the demands are met? Probably not. This is Victor's pattern. Make demands, collect concessions, kill the hostage anyway as a demonstration of power. Joseph's expression was grim. Carlo's family isn't equipped to handle this. They're small-time, mostly legitimate businesses with some gray area operations. They don't have resources for war with the Albanians. Alexander's jaw was tight with controlled fury, which is exactly why Victor targeted them. Forces us to either help, demonstrating solidarity but diverting resources, or abandon them, which fractures the alliance and makes everyone question the value of staying united. What will you do? I asked. Help, but carefully. Victor wants us reactive and emotional. I need to be strategic. He turned to Joseph. Increase surveillance on all known Albanian locations. I want to know where Victor is at all times, who he's meeting with, every move he makes. And intensify the investigation into Paolo. If he's our leak, he might know where they're holding the boy. Already on it. We've been tracking his communications for the past week. He's clean on his main phone, but he has a second device he thinks we don't know about, intercepting that traffic now. After Joseph left, I helped Alexander clear the breakfast dishes. You're going to try to save that boy, if possible. But realistically, Tommy Benedetti is probably already dead. Victor doesn't keep hostages alive longer than necessary. The clinical assessment of a 16-year-old's likely death should have shocked me. Instead, I recognized it for what it was, the painful realism of someone who'd seen too much violence to indulge in false hope. "I'm sorry you have to live with this," I said quietly. "I'm sorry you have to live with it now too." He pulled me against him, his arms solid and safe around me. "But I promise you, Gabriella, this ends soon. Victor, the threats, all of it. I'm going to make certain you can live without fear again." Standing there in his arms while plans for violence and strategy swirled around us, I understood that loving Alexander meant accepting all of him. The protector and the predator, the man who showed me tenderness, and the one who ordered violence without hesitation. And despite everything, despite danger and moral complexity, and the blood that stained his hands, I chose him anyway. Paolo Ricci arrived at the penthouse on a gray Wednesday afternoon, escorted by two of Alexander's men, who looked like they'd be happy to break bones if given the signal. The accountant's face was pale, sweat beading at his temples despite the cool temperature. He knew why he'd been summoned. Alexander gestured to the chair across from his desk without warmth. "Sit down, Paolo." I stood near the windows, ostensibly reviewing documents on my tablet, but actually observing every nuance of the interaction. This was the confrontation Alexander had been building toward for 2 weeks. "Mr. Pellegrini, I can explain, then explain." Alexander's voice was dangerously calm. "Explain the second phone we've been monitoring. Explain the payments to shell companies that don't exist. Explain why you've been feeding information to Viktor Krasnicki's organization for the past 3 months. Paolo's face crumbled. "They have my daughter. Not physically, but they own her debts. $200,000 she owes to their gambling operations. They said if I didn't cooperate, they'd make an example of her. Why didn't you come to me? Because I was ashamed. Because I've worked for your family for 12 years and I let my daughter's problems become everyone's problem." His voice broke. "I never gave them anything that would directly hurt you. Just operational details, schedules, minor intelligence. Nothing critical." Alexander leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "You understand the penalty for betrayal?" "Yes." Paolo's hands shook. "I'm ready to accept whatever consequences you deem appropriate. But please spare my daughter. She's foolish and weak, but she doesn't deserve to die for my mistakes." The silence stretched for long moments. I could see Alexander weighing options, calculating risks and benefits. Finally, he spoke. "I'm going to offer you a choice, Paolo. You can leave this room in a body bag, or you can leave it as a double agent working for me." Paolo's head snapped up. "What?" "The $200,000 your daughter owes. I'll pay it. She gets clean, gets help for her addiction, and you continue feeding information to Victor's people. Except now, the information you provide will be carefully curated by me. You'll help us win this war, and in exchange, your daughter lives, and you keep your position. Why would you do this? Because you're more valuable to me alive and cooperative than dead and making a point. And because your betrayal came from desperation rather than greed. Which means you can potentially be trusted if I remove the source of that desperation." Alexander's eyes hardened. "But understand this clearly, Paolo. If you betray me again, if you warn Victor about this arrangement, if you do anything except exactly what I tell you, your daughter dies first. Slowly. And then you die. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear, Mr. Pellegrini. Thank you. I swear on my life, I won't let you down. You already let me down once. Don't make it twice." Alexander gestured to the guards. "Take him to Joseph. They'll coordinate the double game." After Paolo was escorted out, I moved to stand beside Alexander's desk. That was merciful. That was strategic. Paolo knows things about Victor's operation now, including details about how they communicate and what they're planning. But more importantly, during his initial recruitment, Victor got drunk and boasted about how he took leadership of his faction. I felt my pulse quicken. What did he say? That his uncle was weak, too willing to negotiate with the Italians. So Victor arranged an accident that looked like a heart attack, but was actually poison. He murdered his own uncle to seize power 3 years ago. Alexander pulled up files on his computer. In Albanian organized crime culture, that's an unforgivable violation of honor code. If proven to the Council of Elders in Tirana, Victor would lose all legitimacy and face traditional punishment. Death sentence carried out by his own people. That's the leverage you need, if I can prove it. Paolo remembers the name of the man who actually administered the poison, a lieutenant who's since been killed in unrelated violence. But he also mentioned that Victor kept documentation, insurance against anyone else trying to remove him, bank transfers, communications, even a recorded confession he used to ensure loyalty from key members. Where would he keep something like that? That's what I need to find out. I'm assigning a team to investigate Victor's known properties and associates. If we can locate those documents, we win this war without firing a shot. Victor goes into exile, or gets executed by his own people, and his organization collapses without leadership. 2 days later, Alexander informed me we'd be traveling to Atlantic City for an emergency summit. The 5 major families need to present a united front. Carlo Benedetti's nephew was found dead yesterday, dumped in the harbor. Everyone's demanding action, but there's no consensus about what that action should be. I'm coming with you. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. It could be dangerous. Victor's people will know about the meeting, which is exactly why you need to bring me. Leaving me here while you negotiate shows weakness, suggests you're more worried about protecting me than about the larger conflict. Taking me demonstrates confidence that your security can handle any threats. A slow smile spread across his face. When did you become a strategist? I've been paying attention for 9 months. Some of it stuck. I crossed my arms. Besides, you said I have good instincts about people. Use them. Let me observe these family leaders and tell you what I notice. He considered for a moment, then nodded. Pack for overnight. We leave tomorrow at noon. Atlantic City in late November was cold and windswept. The boardwalk nearly empty except for dedicated joggers and people who had nowhere better to be. The hotel Alexander chose was classic old money luxury, all marble and gold fixtures and staff who moved with practiced discretion. True to his principles, he booked us rooms on different floors. But when I emerged from my room that evening dressed for the formal dinner in a deep plum dress that hugged my curves, I found him waiting in the hallway. You look stunning, he said, his eyes traveling over me with heat that made my skin flush. You clean up nicely yourself. He wore a charcoal suit that emphasized his broad shoulders, his dark hair perfectly styled, a watch that probably cost more than a car visible at his wrist. He offered his arm and I took it, feeling the solid strength of him beneath expensive fabric. The private dining room held a long table set for 12. 5 family heads with their seconds, plus Alexander and me. I recognized most of them from photographs and phone calls. Salvatore Santoro with his calculating eyes. Antonio Greco, whose Brooklyn operations ran like clockwork. Marco De Luca, who controlled most of Queens. And Teresa Vitale, the only woman running a family, whose late husband's operations she'd seized and expanded ruthlessly. Alexander, Teresa said, her sharp gaze fixing on me. You brought your assistant to a strategic discussion? I brought my most trusted advisor, he corrected smoothly. Miss Mitchell has insights that have proven valuable. Salvatore Santoro snorted. Your most trusted advisor is young enough to be your daughter, and pretty enough to distract from business. I felt Alexander tense beside me, but before he could respond, I spoke up. Actually, I'm 28, Mr. Santoro. Old enough to have served as executive assistant to Mr. Pellegrini for nearly a year, coordinating logistics for most of your business dealings with him. Perhaps you'd prefer I leave so you can continue making assumptions about women based on appearance rather than competence. Dead silence filled the room. Then Teresa Vitale laughed, the sound sharp and approving. I like her. She stays. The dinner began with expected posturing. Each family leader wanted different approaches to the Victor problem. Salvatore pushed for immediate military response, a coordinated attack on all known Albanian locations. Antonio preferred economic warfare, cutting off their revenue streams until they had no choice but to withdraw. Marco wanted negotiation, carving up territory to avoid further bloodshed. The discussion grew heated, voices rising as old grudges and competing interests surfaced. Antonio and Marco particularly clashed, their families having disputed borders for years. Your problem, Marco said sharply, is that you've always overextended. You want more territory than you can effectively control. And your problem is cowardice disguised as pragmatism. Antonio shot back. You'd negotiate with anyone rather than stand on principle. I watched the dynamic carefully, noticing how the argument was pulling focus from Victor onto interfamily disputes. This was exactly what the Albanian wanted, division masquerading as debate. "Gentlemen," I said quietly, and somehow my voice cut through the noise. Everyone turned to look at me. "If I may offer a historical perspective?" Alexander nodded permission, though I could see curiosity in his expression. In 1282, the Sicilian Vespers began because French occupation of Sicily had created resentment among local powers. But what triggered the actual rebellion wasn't unified hatred of the French. It was a specific incident involving a French soldier and a Sicilian woman that gave disparate factions a common cause to rally around. The rebellion succeeded not because everyone agreed on everything, but because they agreed on the immediate priority, removing the foreign threat before addressing internal disputes. I had their attention now. Viktor Krasniki is your foreign threat. He doesn't respect your codes, your traditions, or your territories. He killed a 16-year-old boy to make a point. If you can't set aside internal disagreements long enough to remove him, you're essentially handing him victory. He'll pick you off one family at a time while you argue about borders and principles. Marco leaned back in his chair. "The girl makes a valid point. The girl has a name," Teresa said dryly. "And she's right. We put Victor down first. Then we can go back to our usual bickering about who owns which street corner." The mood shifted after that. Discussion turned constructive, focused on actual strategy rather than positioning. By the time dessert arrived, they'd hammered out a temporary alliance with clear terms: shared intelligence, coordinated security, and unified economic pressure on Albanian operations until Victor could be eliminated or driven out. Alexander's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently in acknowledgement of what I'd accomplished. After the dinner finally ended near midnight, we walked back to the elevators in comfortable silence. At my floor, Alexander followed me out. "That was remarkable," he said as we moved down the hallway toward my room. "You diffused a situation that was minutes away from complete breakdown. I just pointed out what was obvious." "No, you read the room perfectly and found exactly the right angle to redirect their focus. That historical reference wasn't random. You knew it would resonate because these are men who see themselves as inheritors of tradition." He stopped outside my door, his expression intense. "You were perfect tonight, Gabriella. Intelligent, poised, commanding respect from people who don't give it easily. I had a good teacher." His hand rose to cut my face, thumb tracing my cheekbone. "I keep trying to maintain appropriate distance, keep trying to be noble and patient. But watching you tonight, seeing you hold your own against men twice your age with 10 times your experience, all I could think about was how much I want you." My breath caught. "Then take me. Are you certain? Really certain? Because once I cross this line, there's no going back for me." I pulled his face down to mine, answering with a kiss that held nothing back. 9 months of tension and denial, and growing love poured into that contact, desperate and claiming and absolutely sure. We broke apart only long enough for me to fumble my keycard into the lock. The door barely closed behind us before Alexander had me pressed against it, his mouth on mine, and his hands tangling in my hair. "I love you," he said between kisses. "I've loved you for months and tried to deny it because loving you made you vulnerable, but I can't pretend anymore. You're everything I didn't know I needed. I love you too," I gasped as his lips moved to my neck. "I think I've loved you since that first month, when you remembered I took my coffee with cream and had it waiting before I even arrived." He pulled back just enough to look at me, his dark eyes blazing with emotion. "You brought light back into my life, Gabriella. Before you, I was just existing, going through motions, building an empire that meant nothing because there was no one to share it with. You made me want to actually live again." I kissed him again, pouring every bit of love and certainty into the contact. Whatever came next, whatever dangers still lurked, we'd face them together. No more distance, no more restraint. Just two people choosing each other despite every logical reason not to. And in that hotel room overlooking the Atlantic, with the sound of waves crashing far below, we finally became what we'd been fighting against for months. Not employer and assistant, not protector and protected, just two people irreversibly, completely in love, Returning to New York felt different after Atlantic City. The penthouse that had seemed like protective isolation now felt like home, a space Alexander and I had carved out from the chaos surrounding us. We'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and neither of us wanted to pretend otherwise. The morning after our return, I woke wrapped in Alexander's arms in his bedroom, dawn light filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He was already awake, watching me with an expression that combined tenderness and possessiveness in equal measure. "Good morning," I murmured, my voice still rough with sleep. "It's a very good morning." He brushed hair from my face, his touch gentle, "Though I should let you sleep. You need rest after the past few days." "I'm fine." Better than fine, actually. But as I sat up, dizziness washed over me in a sudden wave. I gripped the edge of the mattress, waiting for the sensation to pass. Alexander was instantly alert. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Just got up too fast." I steadied myself, taking a slow breath. "I'm okay." His eyes narrowed with concern, but he didn't push. We dressed and had breakfast while reviewing the intelligence Joseph had compiled overnight. Paolo's double agent work was already bearing fruit. He'd fed the Albanians false information about a shipment route, and Victor's people had wasted resources surveilling an empty warehouse in Jersey City. "How long can we maintain this before they realize Paolo's been turned?" I asked, reviewing the reports on my tablet. "Maybe 2 weeks if we're careful. Victor's paranoid but not stupid. Eventually he'll notice the intelligence isn't yielding results." Alexander's jaw tightened. "Which means we have a narrow window to locate those documents proving he killed his uncle. My team has been investigating his properties, but so far nothing." Over the next week, I threw myself into work with renewed focus. The alliance formed in Atlantic City was holding, intelligence sharing between families creating a more complete picture of Victor's operations. But I couldn't shake the fatigue that seemed to settle over me like a heavy blanket. I'd wake exhausted despite sleeping 8 hours. Climbing the stairs to the penthouse gym left me breathless in ways that didn't make sense for someone my age and fitness level. I dismissed it as stress. The situation with Victor, the intensity of my relationship with Alexander, the constant low-level anxiety of living under threat. My body was simply responding to circumstances. But on a Tuesday afternoon, I stood too quickly from my desk, and the world tilted sideways. I managed to grab the edge before falling, but the brief loss of consciousness scared me badly enough that I couldn't hide it. Alexander found me minutes later, still gripping the desk, face pale and hands shaking. "That's it." His voice left no room for argument. "We're going to the hospital right now. It's probably nothing, just stress and not eating enough. Then we'll confirm that with actual medical professionals instead of your unqualified self-diagnosis." He was already texting Joseph, arranging for the car and security detail. "Dr. Castellano is a family friend. He'll see you immediately and keep this completely confidential." An hour later, I sat in an examination room at a private medical facility that didn't look like any hospital I'd ever visited. More like a luxury hotel with medical equipment. Dr. Castellano was in his 60s, professionally warm but clearly accustomed to treating patients who valued discretion above all else. Alexander stayed through the initial examination, his hand gripping mine while the doctor took vitals and asked questions about symptoms. But when Dr. Castellano suggested some additional tests, Alexander's phone buzzed insistently. He glanced at the screen and cursed under his breath. "I need to take this. It's about the Victor situation." "Go," I told him. "I'll be fine here. It's just tests." He hesitated, conflict clear on his face. "Joseph and Vincent are right outside. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, you tell them immediately. I promise. Go handle your business. I'll wait for you." The kiss he pressed to my forehead was lingering and worried, but he left to take the call. Dr. Castellano conducted a thorough series of tests while I answered questions about my medical history, diet, and stress levels. Blood work, blood pressure monitoring, a brief neurological examination. "Everything looks normal," he said finally. "Blood pressure is slightly elevated, but nothing alarming. I'd say this is most likely stress-related, possibly combined with not eating regularly and disrupted sleep patterns. But I want these blood tests analyzed fully. Results should be ready tomorrow. So I'm not dying." He smiled. "Not today. But you should take better care of yourself, Miss Mitchell." Whatever stress you're under, it's taking a physical toll. I thanked him and collected my things, feeling foolish for worrying Alexander over what amounted to exhaustion. Joseph and Vincent were waiting in the hallway, their presence a reminder that even a simple doctor's visit required armed security in my new reality. Mr. Pellegrini had to handle an urgent situation, Joseph said as we walked to the exit. He'll meet you back at the penthouse. Carlo and Marco are already bringing the car around. The black SUV waited at the curb, windows tinted dark against the late afternoon sun. Vincent opened the rear door, and I slid into the leather seats, grateful to be heading home. Joseph climbed into the passenger seat while Vincent took the wheel, pulling smoothly into Manhattan traffic. We'd traveled maybe 10 blocks when Vincent's voice cut through the quiet. We've got a tail. Black sedan, 3 cars back. Been with us since we left the medical center. My stomach clenched. Joseph was already on his phone, speaking rapidly in Italian. How many? At least 2 visible in the sedan. Probably more in backup vehicles. Vincent's eyes never left the rearview mirror, taking evasive route to confirm. The next few turns proved the tail wasn't coincidental. The black sedan stayed with us through residential streets and sudden direction changes. Joseph ended his call and turned to look at me, his expression serious but calm. Additional security is en route. We're going to lose them before they can set up proper blocking positions. Stay low in your seat and keep your head down. What do they want? You. This is an abduction attempt. He pulled his weapon, checking the chamber with practiced efficiency. But they're not getting you. Vincent accelerated, weaving through traffic with precision that suggested extensive tactical driving training. The sedan behind us matched the maneuvers, closing distance. Then a second vehicle appeared from a side street, trying to cut us off. Brace yourself, Vincent said a second, before he cranked the wheel hard right, jumping the curb to avoid the blocking car. We bounced violently over the sidewalk, narrowly missing a fire hydrant before careening back onto the street. Gunfire erupted behind us. The rear window exploded in a shower of safety glass. I screamed, ducking low as Joseph returned fire through the broken window. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, each shot like a physical blow. How far out is backup? Vincent shouted over the chaos. 2 minutes. We just need to stay mobile. Joseph ejected an empty magazine and slammed in a fresh one with smooth efficiency. The chase continued through increasingly narrow streets. Vincent drove like he was navigating a video game, taking corners at speeds that should have flipped the vehicle. More gunfire. One of our tires exploded, the SUV lurching dangerously before Vincent regained control. Then suddenly 3 more black SUVs appeared, our reinforcements boxing in the Albanian vehicles with overwhelming force. The shooting stopped as quickly as it had started, the attackers apparently recognizing they were now outnumbered and outgunned. Vincent pulled to a stop in an alley, the damaged SUV hissing steam from the engine. My ears rang from the gunfire. My hands shook uncontrollably. Joseph turned in his seat, his expression concerned. Are you hurt? Any injuries? I checked myself, finding bruises from being thrown around but no blood. I'm okay. Just scared. You did great. Stayed calm, followed instructions. He opened his door. Fresh vehicle is here. We need to move quickly in case they regroup. The transfer happened in seconds, Vincent and 2 other guards forming a protective circle, while Joseph hustled me into an identical SUV. This time we had a full convoy, 3 vehicles moving in formation through the city. My phone rang. Alexander's name on the screen. Are you hurt? His voice was rough with barely controlled panic. Tell me you're not hurt. I'm fine. Joseph and Vincent got me out safely. Thank God. He released a shaky breath. I'm 10 minutes from the penthouse. The entire building is locked down. You'll be safe there until I arrive. Alexander, they really tried to take me. This isn't theoretical anymore. I know. And I'm going to end this. Tonight. Victor just made his last mistake. The penthouse was indeed locked down when we arrived. Guards at every entrance, surveillance activated on every camera. I barely made it inside before my legs gave out, adrenaline crash hitting hard. Joseph caught me, guiding me to the sofa. Shock, he said, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. Perfectly normal reaction. Just breathe slowly and let your body process what happened. I sat there trembling, replaying the attack in my mind. The gunfire, the shattered glass, how close I'd come to being taken, what Victor would have done to me to hurt Alexander. When Alexander finally burst through the door, I'd never seen him look so undone. His hair was disheveled, tie gone, his usually controlled expression raw with emotion. He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled me into his arms hard enough that I couldn't breathe. "I almost lost you." His voice broke on the words. "I left you for one meeting and you almost died. But I didn't. Your security did exactly what they were supposed to do." He pulled back just enough to frame my face with shaking hands, his dark eyes searching mine. "This ends now. Tonight. Tomorrow at the latest. I can't live like this, Gabriella. I can't spend every moment terrified that someone will take you from me. Victor dies or I do. But this war ends." "Don't say that. Don't talk about dying. Then understand what I'm telling you. I'm going to do whatever it takes to eliminate this threat. Things that might be brutal. Things you might not be able to forgive." His forehead pressed against mine. "But I will keep you safe. That's the only thing that matters anymore." I pulled him down into a kiss, tasting desperation and love and determination. When we broke apart, I looked directly into his eyes. "I'm not going anywhere. Not because of fear, not because of today's attack. I choose you, Alexander. I choose this life with you, with all its danger and complications and moral gray areas. So do what you need to do. End this war, and then come back to me." Relief washed over his features. He held me for long minutes, neither of us speaking, just taking comfort in proximity and shared heartbeats. Finally, he stood and pulled out his phone. "Joseph, conference room in 20 minutes. I want every family head on video call. It's time to finish this." As he walked away, making calls and issuing orders, I understood we'd reached the point of no return. Alexander was about to do something that would either end the threat forever or escalate into bloodshed that would consume everything. And I'd just given him my blessing to do whatever darkness required. The plan came together with military precision over the next 48 hours. Alexander worked 18-hour days coordinating with the allied families, positioning resources, and laying the groundwork for what he called the final move. I watched him transform from the man who held me with tenderness into something harder, colder, a general preparing for war. Paolo's role proved crucial. Through carefully controlled leaks, he let Victor's people know that Alexander was finally ready to negotiate territorial concessions, that the attempted abduction had demonstrated the cost of continued conflict, and the Italian families were willing to discuss terms. The meeting would take place at a neutral warehouse near the port, overseen by the Greco family who technically owned the property. "He'll come," Alexander said with certainty during the final briefing. "Victor's ego won't let him resist the chance to claim victory in person. He wants to look me in the eye when he takes what he thinks he's won. And if he doesn't come alone, he won't. He'll bring his top lieutenants, probably 10 or 12 men, but we'll have 30 positioned around the perimeter, plus the evidence that destroys his legitimacy. This ends without mass bloodshed if possible, but it ends either way." The night of the meeting, Alexander insisted I remain at a secondary location, not the penthouse, but a fortified office building in Midtown that the Vitale family used for sensitive operations. Joseph commanded my security detail, along with 6 other guards whose competence was evident in every efficient movement. "You'll be able to hear everything," Alexander explained, fitting a small earpiece into my ear. "But if something goes wrong, if you hear gunfire or the signal cuts out, Joseph gets you out immediately. No arguments. I don't like this. I don't like you walking into danger." He cupped my face in his hands, his dark eyes holding mine with devastating intensity. "I've been walking into danger my entire life, but I've never had someone like you waiting for me to come home. That changes everything. I'm not taking unnecessary risks because I have too much to lose now." The kiss he gave me was thorough and claiming, a promise and a goodbye, just in case. When he finally pulled away, I held onto his jacket for one more moment. "Come back to me. Always." Joseph and I settled into the surveillance room, monitors showing multiple camera angles of the warehouse and surrounding area. The space was cavernous and dimly lit, support columns creating shadows that could hide anything. A single table sat in the center, illuminated by overhead lights, 2 chairs on opposite sides like a stage set for confrontation. Alexander arrived first with 4 men I recognized, including Vincent, who'd saved my life during the abduction attempt. They took positions around the perimeter, weapons visible but not actively threatening. Alexander stood near the table, apparently relaxed, but I could read the tension in his shoulders. "Alpha team in position," Joseph said into his radio. "Bravo team, confirm status." Multiple voices responded, call signs and confirmations that meant nothing to me, but clearly satisfied Joseph's requirements. We had overwhelming force hidden in the shadows, insurance against Victor trying something stupid. 20 minutes passed. Then headlights appeared in the distance, vehicles approaching slowly. 3 black SUVs pulled up to the warehouse entrance. Viktor Krasniqi emerged from the center vehicle. I'd seen photographs, but they didn't capture the reality of him. He was shorter than Alexander, stockier, with the kind of thick muscle that came from manual labor rather than gym routines. His face was broad and hard, a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. He wore an expensive suit that somehow made him look more dangerous rather than refined. 8 men flanked him, all armed, all scanning the warehouse with professional paranoia. Victor's gaze found Alexander, and a cold smile spread across his features. "Pellegrini." His voice came through my earpiece with a thick accent. "You look tired. The pressure of losing getting to you? Let's skip the posturing, Krasniqi. You wanted negotiations. I'm here to negotiate." Alexander's voice was perfectly controlled, giving nothing away. They sat on opposite sides of the table like chess players preparing for an endgame. Victor spread his hands expansively. "My terms are simple. Full control of port operations in Brooklyn and Queens. 20% cut of all shipping revenue from Manhattan. And the girl." My blood turned to ice. Alexander's expression didn't change, but I saw his fingers tighten against the table. "The girl isn't part of any negotiation. She became part when you made her important to you. I want her for insurance. Pretty thing like that. She'll ensure you honor our agreement." Victor's smile widened. "Or maybe I just want her because taking something you love seems appropriate compensation for the trouble you've caused me. You're not getting her. Propose different terms." Victor leaned back, clearly enjoying himself. "No, those are the terms. Accept them, or watch your organization bleed slowly while I pick off everyone you care about." Alexander was silent for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket. Victor's men immediately raised their weapons, but Alexander moved slowly, deliberately, pulling out a slim folder and setting it on the table. "Before we continue negotiations, there's something you should see." Victor eyed the folder suspiciously. "What is this?" "Open it." The Albanian grabbed the folder and flipped it open. Even through the grainy camera feed, I could see his face go pale. He shuffled through the documents, his expression shifting from confusion to rage to something that looked like fear. "Where did you get these?" His voice had lost its confident edge. "Does it matter? What matters is that I have bank transfer records, communications, and testimony from someone who was present when you poisoned your Uncle Anton 3 years ago. The same uncle who led your faction before you murdered him to take power." Victor stood abruptly, his chair scraping across concrete. "This is fabrication. Lies. The Council of Elders in Tirana won't think so. I've already sent copies to 3 respected members of the Albanian governing body. They're very interested in examining evidence that you violated the oldest laws of your people." Alexander remained seated, projecting calm authority. "Killing family for power is the ultimate betrayal in your culture. You know what the traditional punishment is. You're bluffing. I'm offering you a choice. Permanent exile, South America preferably, with enough money to live comfortably. You disappear, your organization collapses, and the territory remains with the families who've controlled it for generations. Or I release this evidence publicly, and your own people hunt you down and execute you according to tradition." The warehouse had gone completely silent. Victor's men exchanged glances, the seed of doubt clearly planted. If their leader had murdered his own uncle, if he'd violated fundamental codes of honor, their loyalty meant nothing. "You expect me to just walk away?" Victor's voice shook with barely controlled fury. "To abandon everything I've built because you fabricated some documents? I expect you to be intelligent enough to recognize when you've lost. Your men are already questioning you. I can see it in their faces. How long before one of them decides to be the hero who delivers justice for Anton's murder? How long before the council sends someone to collect the blood debt you owe? Victor's hand moved toward his weapon. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion. One of his lieutenants, a younger man with cold eyes, drew his gun and aimed at Alexander. Vincent moved like lightning, firing twice. The Albanian dropped, his weapon clattering to the concrete. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. Then Victor slowly raised his hands away from his own weapon. Smart choice, Alexander said quietly. Any other objections? Victor's remaining men looked at each other, then at their leader, then back to Alexander's overwhelming force emerging from the shadows. The calculation was evident on every face. They were outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and following a leader who'd just been exposed as violating their deepest cultural taboo. What guarantee do I have that you'll let me leave? Victor's voice had lost all its earlier confidence. My word, which, unlike yours, actually means something. You're on a plane to Sao Paulo tomorrow morning. You never return to the United States. You never contact anyone from your former organization. You live out your life in comfortable exile, or you die violently at the hands of your own people. Those are your only options. The silence stretched. Finally, Victor nodded once, defeat written in every line of his body. I accept exile. Joseph, Alexander said into his microphone. Arrange transport and supervision. Mr. Krasniki has a flight to catch. In the surveillance room, I released a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. It was over. No massive bloodshed, no extended war. Just strategic intelligence and ruthless application of pressure. Alexander had won by understanding his enemy's vulnerabilities better than the enemy understood himself. Well played, Joseph murmured, genuine admiration in his voice. That was surgical. But my relief was short-lived. The main camera feed suddenly flickered and died. Then the audio cut out, leaving only static. My heart lurched. What's happening? I demanded. Joseph was already moving, coordinating with teams through multiple channels. Interference. Someone's jamming communications. Could be intentional or technical malfunction. Get it back. I need to know he's okay. Working on it. The seconds dragged like hours. My imagination filled the silence with terrible possibilities. A hidden sniper. Victor having backup we didn't know about. Some trap Alexander had walked into despite all his planning. I gripped the edge of the console, knuckles white, barely breathing. 3 minutes passed. 4. 5. Joseph's attempts to restore communication yielded only static and fragmented words. I was seconds away from demanding we go to the warehouse, when suddenly the feed restored. Alexander stood exactly where he'd been, apparently unhurt, speaking with Vincent, while Victor was being escorted to a vehicle by armed guards. Relief so intense it made me dizzy, washed through my entire body. He's fine, Joseph said, his own relief evident. Just technical issue. Everyone's secure. 20 minutes later, Alexander walked through the door of our surveillance room. I didn't wait for explanations or debrief. I launched myself at him, arms wrapping around his neck, legs around his waist. He caught me easily, one arm banding across my back while the other cradled my head. I couldn't hear you, I said against his neck. The feed cut out and I thought, I'm here. I'm safe. It's over. He held me so tightly I could barely breathe. But I didn't care. His face buried in my hair, his heart pounding against my chest. Victor's on his way to supervised house arrest until his flight tomorrow. His organization is collapsing without leadership. The council in Tirana has been notified and will ensure he never returns. No more threats? No more threats. He set me down but didn't release me, hands framing my face. You're safe now. We're both safe. We can finally have the life we want without looking over our shoulders. Joseph cleared his throat. I'll give you two some privacy. Excellent work tonight, boss. After he left, Alexander pulled me to the couch, settling me in his lap like he couldn't bear to not be touching me. We sat in silence for long minutes, the adrenaline slowly fading, reality settling in. I heard what he said. I told him quietly, about wanting me as part of the negotiation. That was never going to happen. I would have burned this entire city down before letting him touch you. I know, but hearing him talk about me like property to be traded, it made everything real in a way it hasn't been before. This is your world. People are tools, leverage, vulnerabilities to exploit. You're not a tool. You're my entire world. His arms tightened around me. Everything I did tonight, every risk I calculated, every move I made, it was all to ensure you could live without fear. I don't care about territory or power or respect. I care about coming home to you every night knowing you're safe. I twisted to look at him directly. So what happens now? Now we go home. Tomorrow we start building the life we want instead of the life we've been forced to live. And I never let you out of my sight again. He kissed me then. Thorough and possessive, and full of relief that we'd both survive to see tomorrow. And sitting there in his arms, surrounded by the remnants of violence and strategy that had defined our relationship, I understood that loving Alexander Pellegrini meant accepting all of him, the darkness and the light, the violence and the tenderness, the man who commanded empires and the one who held me like I was his salvation. It wasn't a fairy tale romance. It was real and complicated and built on foundations that would horrify most people, but it was ours, and that made it perfect. 3 months passed in a blur of reconstruction and revelation. Victor Krasniki boarded his flight to Sao Paulo under armed escort, and within days his former organization fragmented into competing factions that the established families absorbed or eliminated with surgical efficiency. The Albanian Council in Tirana formally recognized the territorial agreements Alexander had negotiated, providing written assurance that no retaliation would come from Victor's remaining associates. The war was truly over. My role evolved almost immediately. Alexander called a meeting of the allied families 2 weeks after Victor's exile, and when I entered the conference room, he gestured to the seat beside him, rather than the assistant's chair along the wall. Miss Mitchell has proven herself invaluable during this conflict, he announced to the assembled leaders. Her strategic insights, diplomatic skills, and ability to read situations have contributed directly to our success. I'm elevating her position from executive assistant to strategic consultant, with full participation in planning discussions. Salvatore Santoro, who'd questioned my presence at the Atlantic City dinner, nodded slowly. The girl who quoted Sicilian history at us deserves recognition. I have no objections. Teresa Vitale smiled that sharp smile of hers. About time you made it official, Alexander. She's been doing the work anyway. Just like that, I went from secretary to advisor. The change wasn't just cosmetic. Alexander genuinely sought my perspective on negotiations, asked me to sit in on sensitive calls, valued my observations about people and their motivations. I'd found my place in this world not through romance alone, but through competence earned under fire. The penthouse in Tribeca became our primary residence, though Alexander owned property throughout the city. But one Saturday in late February, he drove me to the Upper West Side and stopped in front of a beautifully renovated brownstone, tucked on a tree-lined street. "What do you think?" he asked, watching my face. "It's gorgeous. Whose is it?" "Ours, if you want it. I bought it 5 years ago, intending to renovate and sell, but never got around to listing it. 4 bedrooms, original details preserved, garden and back. A real home rather than a fortress." I understood what he was offering. Not just a house, but normalcy. A space that felt like actual life instead of protective isolation. "I want it," I said simply. We moved in 2 weeks later. Joseph helped coordinate, joking that he'd become a professional mover, given how many times he'd relocated my belongings. The brownstone had character that the sleek penthouse lacked: exposed brick and original hardwood floors, tall windows that let in natural light, a kitchen built for actual cooking rather than just reheating takeout. Alexander converted the 3rd bedroom into a studio for me, installing professional lighting and storage for art supplies I hadn't touched in years. Coming home to find it complete, canvases stacked and waiting, easels positioned to catch the afternoon sun, I'd cried from the sheer thoughtfulness of it. "You mentioned painting once, months ago," he said, pulling me against his chest. I remembered. We established routines that felt remarkably domestic. Morning coffee together while reviewing the day's schedules. Him leaving for the office while I worked from the home office or attended meetings around the city. Dinners where we'd discuss everything from shipping contracts to whether we preferred Italian or Thai food. Evenings reading in comfortable silence, his hand absently stroking my ankle while I stretched across the couch with a novel. Joseph became a genuine friend, rather than just Alexander's second-in-command. He'd stop by for Sunday dinners, bringing wine and stories about his latest dating disasters. Watching him and Alexander together, I understood their relationship went deeper than business. They were brothers in everything but blood, bonded by decades of shared history and absolute trust. "You're good for him," Joseph told me one evening while Alexander was taking a phone call. "I've known Alex since we were kids, and I've never seen him this happy. Even before Sophia died, there was always this weight he carried. With you, he actually laughs. He plans for futures beyond next quarter's revenue." One afternoon in March, I finally worked up the courage to call Amanda. We hadn't spoken since before the threats began, and I owed her explanation, even if I couldn't provide complete honesty. "Gabriella?" Her voice was wary when she answered. "I was starting to think you disappeared off the planet. I'm sorry. Things got complicated with work, and I needed to focus." "Complicated how?" "You just vanished. No calls, no texts, nothing for months." She paused. "Does this have to do with your boss? The one you always got weird about when I asked questions?" I took a breath. "Yes. Alexander and I are together now. Actually together, not just professionally, and his world is complex in ways I can't fully explain. But I'm safe, and I'm happy, Amanda. I need you to believe that." Silence stretched across the line. Then, "Are you in trouble? Do you need help getting out of something?" "No. I know how this sounds. But I'm choosing this life. Choosing him. It's not conventional, and it's not what either of us planned when we were in college dreaming about normal futures. But it's real, and I love him." More silence. Finally, Amanda sighed. "You sound different. More sure of yourself somehow. If you're truly happy and not being coerced or manipulated, then I'm happy for you. But I need to see you. Actual face-to-face confirmation that you're okay." We met for lunch the following week at a coffee in Greenwich Village. Amanda took one look at me, and her expression softened. Whatever she saw in my face, my body language, my demeanor, it convinced her more than words could have. "Okay," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "I don't understand your life, and I'm not sure I want to, but you look genuinely happy. That's what matters." Beyond personal relationships, I found purpose in unexpected places. The educational programs Alexander's organization funded through various front companies were underfunded and poorly managed. I dove into restructuring them, creating scholarship opportunities for underprivileged students, partnering with legitimate universities, and building something meaningful from resources that had previously been little more than tax write-offs. "You're turning blood money into actual good," Alexander observed one evening, reviewing my proposals for expansion. "Most people couldn't reconcile that moral complexity. You just accept it and move forward. The money exists whether I use it well or not. Students getting educations they couldn't otherwise afford don't care about the source of funding. They care about opportunity." I met his eyes directly. "I can't change your world, Alexander, but I can make sure some good comes from it." He pulled me into his lap, his expression proud and tender. "This is exactly what I mean when I say you've changed everything. Before you, I never considered that power could be used for anything beyond maintaining more power. You're showing me there's another way." "Are you actually considering going legitimate?" "Gradually. Not abandoning everything overnight, but shifting focus. The shipping operations can be completely legal with minor restructuring, some of the real estate holdings, even the restaurants and import businesses. It'll take years, maybe decades, but eventually the Pellegrini name could mean something other than organized crime." The hope in his voice made my chest tight. "You'd do that for me?" "I'd do it for us. For the future we're building. For children we might have someday who deserve better than inheriting violence and moral compromise." He kissed me softly. "You've given me reason to want that future, Gabriella. That's a gift I can never repay." On a warm evening in early May, Alexander came home with an unusual expression. Nervous, which I'd never seen from him. He insisted on cooking dinner himself, which mostly involved him ordering prepared meals from our favorite Italian restaurant and pretending he'd made them. I played along, amused and curious. After dinner, he led me to the living room where he'd lit candles and arranged flowers. Simple white roses that filled the space with delicate fragrance. "What's all this?" I asked, my heart beginning to race. "Gabriella Mitchell." He took both my hands in his dark eyes holding mine with devastating intensity. 10 months ago, you walked into my life and changed everything. You brought light to darkness I'd been living in for years. You showed me that power without purpose is meaningless, that love is worth more than territory or respect or any of the things I spent my life pursuing. He released one of my hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. My breath caught. "You've seen the worst parts of me. The violence, the moral compromise, the darkness that comes with this world. And you chose to stay anyway. Not because you were trapped or scared, but because you saw something in me worth loving despite all the reasons you shouldn't." He opened the box, revealing an antique ring with a center diamond surrounded by smaller stones in an intricate setting. This belonged to my grandmother. She wore it for 60 years of marriage to a difficult man in a dangerous world. She was the strongest woman I knew until I met you. Tears were streaming down my face now. He took the ring from the box and held it ready. "Marry me, Gabriella. Make this official. Build this life with me permanently, knowing exactly what you're committing to. Give me the honor of being your husband and spending the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me." Yes. The word came out choked with emotion. Yes, absolutely. Yes. He slid the ring onto my finger, and it fit perfectly, because of course he'd somehow determined my size without me noticing. Then he pulled me into his arms, holding me so tightly I could feel his heart racing against my chest. "I love you," he murmured against my hair. "More than I thought possible. More than is probably wise. You're my entire world. I love you too. Everything about you. Even the complicated parts. Especially the complicated parts because they made you who you are." We stayed like that for long moments, wrapped in each other and the weight of commitment we'd just made. Eventually, Alexander pulled back and gestured to the empty living room floor. "Dance with me? There's no music, so we'll make our own." He pulled me close, one hand on my waist and the other holding mine. And we swayed to silence and heartbeats, and the sound of the city filtering through the windows. No jealousy this time. No interruptions from capos or business emergencies. Just two people who'd found each other despite impossible circumstances, choosing to build something lasting from passion and partnership and profound understanding. I thought about that first night at the party, when Alexander had exploded with jealousy watching me dance with Joseph. How far we'd traveled from that moment of possessive anger to this moment of secure commitment. The journey had been violent and terrifying and beautiful all at once. "What are you thinking?" Alexander asked, reading my expression the way he always could, that I'd do it all again. Every dangerous moment, every terrifying choice, because it led here, to you, to us, even knowing what you know now about my world, especially knowing what I know. No illusions, no pretense. Just truth and choice and love that's strong enough to survive anything. He kissed me then, slow and deep and full of promise, and dancing there in our living room with my engagement ring catching candlelight. I understood that happily ever after didn't mean perfect. It meant choosing each other every day, despite complexity and danger and all the reasons love shouldn't work. We'd built something real from impossible circumstances, a partnership forged in crisis and strengthened by absolute honesty. And whatever came next, whatever challenges the future held, we'd face them together. Not as boss and assistant, not as protector and protected, but as equals who'd seen each other at our worst and chosen love anyway. The music we danced to existed only between us, but it was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. The end.